Hi everyone, I'm Anya. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully now the presentation will be fine. Coherence and cohesion band descriptor. You also have to use cohesion in the middle of sentences, not just in the beginning of sentences. Task achievement, which I'm targeting in my first sentence. And I'm going to continue this trend in all my sentences. How am I going to organize my essay or my report in a way that makes sense? It doesn't do any help to you to just write amazing essays, but it takes you 50 minutes. Are you going to write writing task 2 in 10 minutes? You're going to be explaining, so this is my idea, this is the data, and this is how these two are connected. Thanks for your time. Should we make a start? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Anya. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully now the presentation will be fine. So let me start off by telling you a little bit about myself and what we're going to be doing today. So my name is Anya. I've been teaching at Cambridge for about 1 year. I have been teaching focus courses, and I've also been teaching full courses, and now I have a speaking club. And I also have an online course, which I'm going to tell you a little bit at the end. So today what we're going to be talking about is how to target the band descriptors in writing. Now, who knows what band descriptors are? Yeah, you know, I remember you from last time. Yeah, okay, does everybody else know? We're going to be introducing it. But basically in Ielts, your speaking and your writing have band descriptors, which is what the examiners test to see if you're reaching the requirements. Reading and listening is based out of 30 or 40, so that's just based on the score. So can we turn off the lights now, please? Can we turn off the lights? Yes. We're going to start off with writing task 1. And then we're going to do writing task 2. But first, let me start. Can you all read this? Yeah? All right. So in writing task 1 and in writing task 2, we have four criteria in our band descriptors. The only difference between writing task 1 and writing task 2 is the first criteria, which is task achievement and task response. So in task achievement, what do you think that criteria tests you for? Yeah? Sorry? Yeah, if you reach the question, what else? In writing task 1, exactly. So what's the word count for writing task 1? Exactly. It's 150 words. And if you write less than 150 words, this is the criteria where your score goes down from. That's the first thing. The second thing is your overview. Now this is a non-negotiable, which means that you can't choose sometimes to write an overview, sometimes not to write an overview. If you look at number 6, band 6, it says presents an overview with information appropriately selected. And then if you look at a 7, it means that you have a strong overview. Now, what do we usually put in an overview? Yeah. Do we put data in the overview? Exactly. So the usual trend that I like to follow is I like to talk about the highest and the lowest trend. Or I like to talk about the biggest difference and the smallest difference. That's what I usually, by a standard, say in my overview. Now if we look at coherence and cohesion, what is included in this? And? Not grammar. Structure, sure. One important thing is your transition words. What is a transition word? Linking words, that's what you know it by. So what are some examples of linking words? Yeah? Exactly. So if we look at a 6, it says, if you look at the second one, it says faulty or mechanical, which means sometimes what students do is they put a transition word or linking word after every sentence. That's not how we talk normally. So this is what you would call mechanical. Also, if you look at a 7, it says there's some underuse and some overuse. That means either you're using it too little or you're using it too much. So it's all about finding the balance. Typically, I like to use at least 4 transition words in my writing task 1, which is only 150 words. Now, you'll notice that coherence and cohesion is very closely linked to grammar. Why? Because if your grammar is bad, then it's very hard to understand what you're talking about. So you'll see usually if you stumble in one, the other one will also be affected. Now, if we talk about lexical resource, what comes under that? Exactly. Not so much collocations in writing task 1, but usually synonyms for typical words that we use, like increase, decrease, stay the same. And obviously, your spelling really counts in this. And then the last one is grammar range and accuracy. Now, you can have perfect grammar, but you can still be stuck at a 6. Why? Because in your grammar, they're also checking for complex and compound sentences. So if you look at a 7, you'll see it says uses a variety of complex sentences. What is that? Independent what? Exactly. So using clauses which are made up of more than one clause. So 2 to 3 clauses put together to make a compound or complex sentence. So this is something I've seen a lot of students who have good command over grammar, but they make very simple sentences, and therefore I'm unable to give them higher than a 6 in grammar range and accuracy. All right? So that makes up our first band descriptor. Let's move on to the example I have now. This is a line graph, and you'll see that this table is not part of this line graph. This is something that I make myself when I'm doing these tasks. So the question is, the graph below gives information from the Annual Energy Outlook 2008 about consumption of energy in the USA since 1980 with the projection until 2030. So what tenses do you think we're going to be using? Okay, so just simply, we're going to be using past and we're going to be using future. Are we going to be using present tense? How can you use present? But this is not from 2022, because when was the data given to us? From 2008. So that means in this case, 2008 is the present. Do you see that? So we can't imagine that 2022 is a present because it's our present. We have to look at what the data is showing. So in this case, we would assume that over here is present tense, everything before is past, everything ahead of it is future. Right? So that's one important thing to know. You have to know what tense am I going to be writing in, and you have to be consistent. If you're going to start in present tense, you have to stay in present tense. You can't switch to past tense then. The second thing, now we've looked at this axis. Now we have to look at this axis. What are the units that we're going to be talking in? Yeah, exactly. It says quadrillion units. So this is connected to your task achievement score. In this case, you have to be using the right metric of the units. So sometimes you're given data in percentages. Sometimes you're given in kilometers. Sometimes you're given in kilograms. In this case, our unit is quadrillion units. So every time we mention one of these numbers, we have to follow it by saying quadrillion units. So those are the two things I want you to remember, what tense you're using and what units you're using. Does that make sense so far? Let's move on now to what I do over here. This is something before any writing task 1 that I start, I always make a little table for myself summarizing the data. So if you can see, I've basically said what's the first year and what's the last year. Everything else, I'm just going to eyeball it. So I know that there are 6 energy sources which are listed right down here. Then I have these 2 years, and in the boxes, I filled out where it started and what it ended at. So if we look at petrol and oil, that's the blue one. It started at 35, and then it ended at what? 49 quadrillion units. Now if we do natural gas and coal, these are 2 over here. They started at 20 and 16 and ended at 25 and 32. Now, if you look at the pattern over here, what can you see about this pattern over here? 2 times, exactly. Would you have been able to see that pattern if you just looked at it over here? That this doubled? You can't really see it. Maybe if you pay attention, but personally, I would not be able to see it if it was in this form. But if I put it in this form, now I can see patterns. I can see that this increased by 5. This doubled, this stayed the same. So that's why I always recommend that you start by summarizing your data. It only takes 45 seconds, 1 minute. But now you can see what's the main data that I have to write about. And then I can cross out as I'm writing it. So this is how I compile all the information. So the first thing that I start with when I'm writing my essay is I start with a paraphrase, followed by an overview, followed by body paragraphs. What do you say in your paraphrase? What do you paraphrase? Not the question, exactly. So you can see I've put the question in the top, and then I've written my paraphrase over here. And you can see I've taken out all the information which wasn't important. So I took out the information about the fact that it came from the Annual Energy Outlook 2008. That's not important. What I've included is what are the dates that I'm talking about, which country am I talking about, and I've said that we're talking about energy sources. So that's summarizing all the energy that was given to us here. That's the paraphrase. Now, if you are not able to effectively make a paraphrase of the question, this is when your task achievement goes down. Okay? So you want to try to find you want to filter all the unnecessary information. Now we're going to follow it up with our overview. Now, as I mentioned before, in my overview, I like to talk about what is the highest and what is the lowest. So what I've said is petrol and oil were the leaders in 1980 and are thought to continue in this position. So what am I saying? I'm saying that they were the top in the first year and they're predicted to stay the top even in the last year of our scale. Whereas hydropower is expected to continue being the least used energy source as it was before. So very simply, I've just said what was the highest and what was the lowest. And it's fairly simple. In this case, what was the highest before will continue to be the highest. What was the lowest before will continue to be the lowest. Now, if we look, I've also put some words in bold. What do you think those words are? Sorry? Yeah, so they're synonyms for predictions. So everything that I put in bold is targeting the lexical resource score. Right? And you'll see this a little bit more. But we need to think of synonyms for common words that we use in writing task 1. So for example, synonyms for increase. What are some synonyms? Rise, grow. Go up. Okay, what else? Peaked, yeah. What did you say? Upward trend, very good. Yeah, you can say all that. What about for decrease? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else? Plummet, decline, yeah. And what about for stay the same? Sorry? Remain the same, remain stable, steady, plateau, very good. Not level up, we would say level off. Level up just means you keep going up, right? So you need to commit to memory some synonyms for increase, decrease, and stay the same. And in this case, we also need synonyms for projection because we need to think of a way over and over again to say that this is thought to increase, it's expected to increase. And we'll cover this a little bit after we cover this. So that's the paraphrase and the overview. Are there any questions so far about this stage? No. So your overview, it can be at the beginning or the end, but I prefer to do it at the beginning because I just think coherently it makes more sense that way. Now let's start with our first body paragraph. And I'm going to break down and then I'm going to show you the full essay at the end. So you can see I have my table here, I have my graph here, and how I'm going to start writing my first body paragraph. I'm starting by saying, to begin, 35 quadrillion units of petrol and oil were consumed in 1980, which was significantly higher than any other energy source. So, what do I have underlined? And what is it targeting? In the band descriptors, what is it targeting? Exactly, coherence and cohesion. So, I've also done it over here. Why do you think it's over here? It's also for CC, but what is it for? Exactly. It's for grammar, and it's also for cohesion in between the sentence. So you have to remember, in the in the coherence and cohesion band descriptor, you also have to use cohesion in the middle of sentences, not just in the beginning of sentences. So this is how you make complex and compound sentences, which targets not only your CC score, but also your GRA score. Then I have 35 quadrillion units in italics. What is this targeting? Task achievement, exactly. So I'm starting and I already have my CC, GRA, and task achievement, which I'm targeting in my first sentence. And I'm going to continue this trend in all of my sentences. Then, this is still part of the first paragraph. I'm saying it experienced some fluctuation until the mid-90s. So if we look at the top one, because we have 6 line graphs, I'm not going to be talking about every single time it went down and went up, because then we'll reach 500 words. So I'm just going to summarize everything that happened in the middle as a fluctuation. And then I'm going to say, after which it continued to climb and is expected to reach almost 50 quadrillion units by 2030. So do you see how I've structured this paragraph? I said what it started at, and then I explained the middle part, and then I explained what is it going to end at. And I've used dates, and I've used units. So you can see I'm targeting all the band descriptors, talking about the dates and the units for task achievement, using Lexical Resource because I'm using the words continue to climb instead of increase. I'm using the word expected, which is a synonym for projected. And then I'm talking about CC, so I've used transition words and also cohesion in the middle of sentences. And my GRA, obviously you would hope that your grammar is strong, but on top of that, you're also using not single clause sentences. So this is the checklist you need to have in your mind. In every paragraph, am I missing transition words? Am I missing my data? Am I talking about dates and units? These are the kinds of things that you need to talk about. So this is the first paragraph. Now that I know I've said here 35 and I know I've said here 50, I'm going to cross out from my data. So I know 2 out of 12 I've already spoken about. All right? Any questions so far? Let's move on. Now we're going to be talking about these two. Now when it comes to structuring your writing task 1, you need to make sure how am I going to organize my essay or my report in a way that makes sense. Now here you could have spoken about these 3 and then these 3. Or you could have spoken about the top and the bottom and then the middle ones. But for me, what makes the most sense is just dividing it the way that it's been given to me. So the top one, it's much above everyone else, so I'm going to keep it as one paragraph. Then these 2, you can see that there's a pattern in the middle. And then these 3 kind of are the same. So I'm going to say this in a separate one. So now when we look at natural gas and coal, I said, on the other hand, coal and natural gas consumption started at 16 quadrillion units and 20 quadrillion units respectively. Now, this grammatical feature, respectively, what does it mean and how do we use it? Referring back to what? Exactly, it's one by one. So respectively means the way that I have listed it is the way that you should read it. So if I've said coal and natural gas, coal is number 1, natural gas is number 2, then 16 and 20, that means 16 needs to be linked to coal and 20 needs to be linked to natural gas. So that's how we use respectively, when we don't want to repeat it over and over again. But the former is predicted to overtake the latter and double in consumption to reach 32 quadrillion units by 2030. What does former and latter mean? Very good, exactly. So former in this case would be coal and latter would be natural gas. Right? So as you can see, I'm using exactly the same patterns as before. I'm starting off by using a transition word, which I've also included here to make compound. Then I've used my task achievement by talking about what is the data points over here and over here. And I'm also using a lexical resource. And which word am I using here for projected? Predicted, exactly. Now, if we look here at how I'm structuring this, One way, if you want to get more advanced scores, is you have to try to vary the way that you're giving information. You can't say, for example, petrol and oil was 35 and it's going to become 50. Natural gas was 20 and it's going to become 25, and just listing it. That's not very advanced. So what I'm saying here is I'm listing what it started at, but then I'm saying, if you look at yellow one, natural gas, this was the first one. Then we can see something happened and then it became the second one. Do you see how these two flipped? Can you see that trend? Exactly. So that's why I'm using the word overtake the ladder. So I'm presenting these two in relation to each other, not just one separately and the other separately. I'm trying to see the pattern and then talk about them in relation to each other. And I'm using the word double to show that I'm noticing trends. You could have said it increased by 2 times, or it doubled, or it increased by, doubled. And then now that I've already spoken about this one, I'm going to put one separate sentence talking about the second one. So I said, additionally, natural gas is speculated to experience a slight increase of 5 quadrillion units. So you'll notice here I'm not giving the total number. But because here I said it started at 20, if I said it increased by 5, you can already understand that it went up to 25. Okay? And what's the lexical resource that I'm using here? Speculated. So now can you see how many words we've thought of which are synonyms for projected? We're always varying it. And you'll see in my table, I keep crossing out as I reach them. It really depends on how much data you have. If you have, for example, 5 data points, then I would suggest you try to include 4 or 5. But if you have, for example, 6 pie graphs and you have 18 data points, it's not going to be possible for you to mention all of them. Even in this essay, you wouldn't have had to use all 12, but I found a way to include all of them. Now, I'm going to be talking about these two in relation to each other. So I start off by saying, moreover, nuclear, solar, wind, and hydropower all started at 4 quadrillion units in 1980. Now, I'm going to break it down and talk about each of them. By 2000, nuclear and solar wind were being consumed marginally more than hydropower. So if we look at these two over here, by 2000, they are higher than this one. Okay? So you'll see that even though I'm using the data that I used in the trends, in my table, I'm still seeing the trends in the line graph. So I'm doing them simultaneously. Nuclear power is estimated to double by 2030 from 4 quadrillion units in 1980 to 8 quadrillion units, whilst solar wind is expected to increase slightly to 6 quadrillion units. And lastly, although hydropower did experience some variation in the middle years, the forecast for 2030 is that it will mirror the level it was at in 1980. When I say mirror, what does that mean? Yeah, it will reflect what it was in the first year. And we can see that from the data. Even though it went up and down a little bit, or they think it will end at the same place that it started at. Right? So now let's look at some vocabulary that I used. These are all words that I used which were synonyms for projected. And you can see that there are 7, or non-cruelly projected. There were 6 that I used in 150 words which were synonyms for projected. All right? And now if we want to look at the full essay, I'll give you 2-3 minutes now to read this. What I want to draw your attention to is how I targeted the band descriptors when I was writing. I was thinking specifically about how each component of my essay was going to be targeting different sections of the criteria. So how was I meeting task achievement? Obviously, the first thing, I already reached the word count. It was 232 words, which means I'm above, so it's okay. The second thing, was I using the correct units and using the correct data? And was I mentioning in the overview and in the entire body paragraphs, was I mentioning all the main trends and patterns? Then for lexical resource, was I thinking of different ways to give my information and thinking of synonyms for how to say increase, how to say decrease, how to say fluctuation, how to say projection? And obviously, was I using correct spelling? Then for coherence and cohesion, was I using transition words in the beginning of sentences, and was I using cohesion in the middle of sentences? And then for GRA, obviously you need to use correct grammar, but also was I trying to make complex sentences by making sentences that were more than 2 or 3 clauses. So that's every time when I'm writing, I need to think about, am I targeting these 4 criteria? And that's how you formulate a strong essay. So, are there any questions right now about any writing task 1? Yeah. You can go ahead and we'll do you. So there's no introduction in a writing task 1. There's only a paraphrase and an overview. We call introduction for writing task 2 because we're writing an essay. In this case, we're writing a report, so it doesn't have an introduction and conclusion. That's not an introduction, it's a paraphrase. Sorry? Yeah, we do, but we include that in the introduction. I'll actually go over how I write my introductions in writing task 2. Sure, you can if you'd like. Okay?
How long does it take to write all these paragraphs?
For you?
Yeah, for us, it's more than 232 words.
Well, it depends how fast do you write.
No, it's done.
No, you're not docked at all for writing too much, but when you write writing task 1 and writing task 2 where you're given 1 hour, so if you spend too much time on writing task 1 and then you're not able to reach the word count for writing task 2, then your score would go down. But you're not penalized for writing more than 150 words. Yeah, because that all comes under using trends and making comparisons. So if you want to get that higher score, you need to make comparisons because that's how you're going to be showing more advanced observation and writing. Now, if you're only talking about everything in absolute, you're not going to be making those comparisons in complex sentences. So that does get affected. Anything else?
If you have a question, just raise a hand. I give you a microphone.
There's someone over there, I think.
Is it appropriate to use on the other hand in task 1?
Sure.
And
there's no rule. I think one piece of information that I think a lot of students misunderstand is they think that there are like rules in English that you can only use this vocabulary in writing task 1 and only this vocabulary in writing task 2. There's no rule like that at all. Even when I heard someone say that if you say on the one hand, and that means you have to say on the other hand. It's not necessary. You can say on the one hand, and then in another paragraph you can say furthermore, or secondly, or in contrast. So there's no rule that if you have to use one, you have to use the other. So I would say discard these notions that you have that there are like strict rules about what to write in writing task 1 and what to write about writing task 2.
thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you?
Questions?
Okay. What do you think about that? In the Ielts, we have task 1 and task 2. Which one we should start first?
So in writing task 2, that's worth double what writing task 1 is. So if you think that writing task 1 is 1/3 of your score, so 33%, writing task 2 is 66%. So some students strategically like to start with writing task 2 to give them the highest chance of finishing that, and therefore it's worth more. But I don't think it makes any difference. What I always tell my students to do is to practice writing in 20 minutes writing task 1. So that way, if you train yourself to write in 20 minutes, then you give yourself double the time, 40 minutes, to write for writing task 2. I think something that's unhelpful that students do is they take as long as they want for writing task 1, trying to make it perfect. That's not going to help you. You need to learn time management as much as you learn writing well. So if you give yourself 20 minutes and the first time you do it, you only reach 100 words, okay, you only reached 100 words. Next time you do 20 minutes, maybe you'll reach 110 words, so on and so forth, and you'll get faster and faster. It doesn't do any help to you to just write amazing essays, but it takes you 50 minutes. Are you going to write writing task 2 in 10 minutes? It's not possible. Any more questions?
Because if you start from task 1, like we write for 20 minutes and then we have 40 minutes. But we find it very difficult to write for 40 minutes, and that's why like we cannot write fully essay. Like let's say we couldn't write a conclusion. But we know that task 2 is like twice more important. Maybe like I heard that even if you, for example, write task 2 for 9 and didn't write, for example, task 1, so your score can be 6. But if you write only task 1, your score will be 3. I mean, yeah, task 2 is, I think it's more important.
I don't think so, because I think whether you start with, what I train my students to do is complete both essays in 1 hour. So to me, it doesn't make any difference if you start with one or the other, because I'm not training you to sacrifice one writing task to finish the other writing task. The way I'm teaching you is you will finish both tasks in 1 hour. So if you start with writing task 2 and you take, for example, 45 minutes and you have 15 minutes to do the other one, still in my eyes, you're doing the wrong thing because you're not going to finish the second essay. So it just depends on what you find more important, I guess. But to me, finishing both essays is more important than writing one essay better than the second essay.
Questions?
I don't think I'm a good comparison because this is like my first language, you know? So for me, these tasks are not very difficult, but for you, you're learning and writing it in a third language. So your achievement is much greater than my achievement. So I don't compare it to myself. It's just not fair, I think.
That's all?
All right. If there's no questions about writing task 1, we'll move on to writing task 2. Yep. Okay. So I'm not going to go over all the band descriptors again because they're all the same, except the first band descriptor, which is task response rather than task achievement. One more thing I want to say, because I see people taking pictures, this is available on the internet. If you just type in Ielts band descriptors writing task 1, it will come up. And it will either be from British Council or from Ielts or from IDP. This one is, yeah, it's from all of them. All right, so you can find it on the internet. It's not a secret. Okay. Now, if we look at 6 and 7, the first thing you always want to address is you want to get to 250 words. It's not negotiable. If you go under 250 words, this is the band descriptor which will get penalized. If you go over, that's absolutely fine. Now, the biggest difference that I see students do is they don't answer all the sections of the question. So sometimes you'll have questions like, you'll have an advantage-disadvantage question. And people will write lots of advantages, but they'll write 2 sentences for disadvantage. Or you'll have, for example, a discussion question where it says, discuss both sides and give your opinion. And they'll only discuss both sides and they'll give half a sentence in their conclusion about their opinion. This is what counts under addresses all parts, but some are more fully covered than others. So this is what you want to do. You want to look at what the question is asking and make sure you're answering every part of the question that's being asked. And I mean, they're basically just mean the same thing for task achievement. So are you, task response. So are you answering the question completely, and are you answering every section of what the question is asking? So let's look at the question we're going to be talking about today. It says, some people think that space exploration is a waste of resources, while others think that it is essential for mankind to continue to explore the universe in which we live. Discuss both sides and give your opinion. So in this case, how many paragraphs do you think you're going to have? Why? And where's your opinion? Okay, but if you include your opinion in just the introduction and conclusion, do you think that that's answering the question fully? It's not enough. Okay, but that means that you agree with one and you agree with the other.
There it says discuss both sides.
Yeah.
We don't have to give our opinion.
What does it say, the last 3 words? Give your opinion. Okay, that's very complicated. The way I would do it is 3 body paragraphs. Opinion, first side, second side, and opinion. That way, I know I'm answering the question fully. Because the question is asking me for 3 things. So I have to give 3 answers. Now, if you wanted to do, for example, first body paragraph and then opinion, and then second body paragraph and then opinion, but you were able to reach them all, like talk about them fully, then perhaps you would be able to defend that. But the way I think is easiest is talking about first paragraph, second paragraph, and then opinion. So I will have 5 paragraphs in this essay. Do you have a question?
What if we write like that, and we agree to the advantage side, and we write about that, like we agree for that, and for the disadvantage side, we write like some people think that the advantage should be like that, but we contradicting it like advantages are more important than the
Yeah, so you can defend that, but what I would say is you have to make it very clear that you are targeting the question. So that's why sometimes students, it's very, like, it's implicit what they're saying, that they agree with one side and disagree with the other side. But you want to make it very clear that this is my opinion. All right, so let's go into it. But the first thing, I want you to now pair up and discuss for 5 minutes some idea generation. What do you think are the advantages of space exploration, and what do you think are the disadvantages of space exploration? All right, so now you're going to think for 5 minutes, and then we're going to feed back. All right? So can you talk to each other? Question?
It is mixed yet, but this say like advantage, disadvantage, and opinion.
It's a discussion question, yeah.
When you're giving your opinion, is it necessary to choose like one side? You are agree or not agree?
No, it's not important. For example, like when we read this essay, I agree with one side, but I say that there are also some things which I think are important, even though I don't agree with it. All right, so can we talk to each other for 5 minutes and think of some ideas which are advantages and disadvantages? Okay, it's back on. So this is what we call idea generation. And what I recommend when you have a question is try to break down both sides and write maybe 2 or 3 ideas that you want to address. Obviously, then you have your opinion, but I don't think you need to brainstorm your opinion. You have your opinion, right? So I would start by writing like 2 or 3 things on one side and 2 or 3 things on the other side, and then I would think, which one do I have the most information on that I can write a good, like, supported paragraph. Now, who has seen this structure before? Peel. Yeah. So this, for those of you who are unfamiliar, we use the Peel structure to structure each paragraph. Because one thing that students have is sometimes they have lots of good ideas, and they have so many good ideas that they want to write all of them. And then even though you have like maybe lots of ideas, I can see you have brainstormed this well, it's not cohesive. And it doesn't make any sense how you're going from one idea to the second idea. Now, it's not important for you to show the examiner, I have 10,000 ideas about how to answer this question. You need to choose the best one, and you need to explain how does it relate to the question. So, what PEEL stands for is point, example, explanation, link. So you want to start your paragraph with your point. What is the main idea that you are asserting? What is your main idea that you are putting forth, that this paragraph is going to be about? Then you have an example. So can you think of a real example that supports your point? Now, it's not important for you to have statistics or dates or anything like that. If you do, great. But if you don't, it's not important, because the examiner knows that you're doing this without the internet. The next thing is the explanation. Now, this is the point that you're showing how your example links to your point. You're going to be explaining, so this is my idea, this is the data, and this is how these two are connected. And then the link, I like to use in 2 different ways. The first way that I like to use it as a concluding sentence. So I basically finish my paragraph by summarizing everything that I've said in my last sentence. Or I can use it as a transition into my next sentence. So what I can, into my next paragraph. So what I can say is I have my point, example, explanation, but on the other hand, and I would start my second paragraph. So you can use the link in 2 different ways. Now, when you become more confident in writing and you become strong, it's not necessary for you to use this structure exactly how I've said it. Sometimes when I'm writing, I use point, example, point, example, explanation, point, example, explanation, link, if I have 2 points, for example. So when you become confident, you can, the way you want it, you can modify it to support your essay. But in the beginning, I recommend that you start like this, because when you become strong like this, then you can start to break the rules. So let's take a look now at how we structure this essay. So when I'm talking about my introduction, the way that I like to structure my introductions is I like to have a hook, then a paraphrase, and then an outline. So my hook is basically my topic sentence, something that's interesting about my essay that is going to make the reader want to read the essay. It's something very general. In my paraphrase, I'm basically taking the question that was given to me and I'm writing it in my own words. So I'm making a summary like I did for writing task 1. And then I'm going to do an opinion, my outline or an opinion. It depends on the question that you're given. Now, what I mean by outline opinion is sometimes I see students write, in this essay, I will be talking about XYZ. It's not wrong, but it's not natural. We don't talk like this. So what I would recommend is that you put your outline of what your essay is going to cover in a little bit more of a covert or a little more natural way. So let's see what I've said. I said space exploration has been intriguing to mankind for decades and was particularly awe-inspiring during the 1950s and 60s during the space race between the US and the USSR. So, in this case, what am I referring to when I'm talking about space race?
But Cold War.
No, not the Cold War.
Like who's going to be the first? I mean,
Yeah, what was the competition?
who can reach the space? I mean.
Yeah, exactly. So the space race was happening, and it was who was going to go into space first, US or USSR. So you can see from my first one, this is a hook. This is making the person interested in what I'm going to be talking about space, but it doesn't address anything about the advantages or disadvantages. So that's what I'm starting off by saying. Then I'm talking about my paraphrase. This is now where I'm introducing what my question is going to be. So I said, but many people think that it's a waste of money, but other people think that it's important for mankind. So I'm basically taking the information that was given and putting it into my own words. And then in my outline and opinion, I'm saying I believe. So this is where I'm introducing what do I think about this question. And that there are better ways to spend money on Earth. Now, if you look at what I've highlighted, can you see awe-inspiring? It's in bold. Can you see that? What does awe-inspiring mean?
Eye-catching.
Not eye-catching. What does awe mean?
Awesome.
Yeah, kind of. Awe means to be like in wonder or to be in surprise or to be in fascination. So awe-inspiring means that during this time in the 1950s and 60s, everyone was so excited about who was going to go into space.
Now also. About
Yeah,
like going to Mars.
Less than before, but yeah, people are still excited. Yeah. And now if you see, I'm also using however, which is targeting what? Yeah, exactly. So even in my introduction, I'm starting by targeting what my band descriptors are going to be. And it's exactly the same thing for the body paragraphs. So if we look at the body paragraphs, I'm going to explain, this is all going to be one paragraph, my first body paragraph, but I'm showing you how I'm dividing it into point, example, explanation, link. And we'll go through each part. So I start by saying, on the one hand, there is no question that funding space exploration comes at a hefty cost and can easily cost upwards of billions of dollars. Whether it is backed by government funding or a wealthy billionaire, it brings into question how vital the expenditure is for the good of humanity. So this paragraph, I'm talking about it being a waste of resources. That's the first position that I have to give. So I'm saying that it costs a lot of money. That is my point. Then I'm following it up with an example. So I'm saying, for example, in the past 12 months, there were 3 private rockets launched by Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson, which would have cost hundreds of billions of dollars for no better reason than these 3 men simply wanted to be precursors of commercial space exploration. Now, I'm using the example in this section. And who are the 3 people that I'm using as examples? Exactly. So these are 3 people that I'm mentioning by name. Now, if you know these people but you don't remember their names or you don't know how to spell them, you can just say lots of private owners have been spending, billions of dollars. So it's not important for you to use their names. It's just important for you to point to a specific example that you can refer to. Then I have my explanation. So this is how I'm showing why is this a waste of money and how is it connected to my point. I said, thus, there was substantial backlash where people noted that this money could have been spent on charities, foundations, or research. It could be argued that this is a utilitarian approach, as it serves to help all, not just one and the most privileged. So this is my explanation. And I'm going to follow it up with the link. Therefore, space exploration, for the sake of it, could be viewed as unethical and perhaps self-serving. So this is making up my first body paragraph. Now, again, let's take a look at the band descriptors. So already I'm giving forth a lot of information well supported, which is going to be my task response. The second thing is going to be CC. So you can see everything that I've put in underline are my transition words. But these are only the transition words, not the cohesiveness in between sentences, like but, and, after, therefore, so on and so forth. Let's take a look now at Lexical Resource. So what does hefty mean? Hefty cost. Yeah. Hefty basically means heavy, so it means like a big cost or a heavy cost. And we're saying billions of dollars. Next, we're saying precursors.
Who's going to be the first?
Yeah. Precursor is going to be who is the first, who is going to start it.
Can you say pioneers?
Yeah, you can say pioneers. What does utilitarian mean? Over here. I actually kind of tried to understand it from the context. No, it's not charity. Yeah, utilitarian means we're going to try to help as many people as possible, even if some people are disadvantaged. That's what utilitarian means. And we have self-serving. What does self-serving mean? Serving yourself, exactly. So, if you had to summarize what I'm talking about in this paragraph, what would you say? Waste of resources, exactly. And why am I saying it's a waste of resources? Yeah. So I'm saying that there are 3 rich men who are sending rockets, and they're spending billions of dollars. And why do they want to do it?
They want to be precursors.
Yeah, they want to be first. They want to say, I was first in space as a private person. But I'm saying, why did people think that this was a waste of resources? Because
Because this money could be...
exactly. So there are much more reasonable causes which this money could have been spent into. And therefore, I'm just concluding it by saying, therefore, some people think it's unethical to spend this much money on space exploration. So that's my first paragraph. Any questions about this?
I have a question for introduction.
Okay.
I think it's too much and too wordy, introduction. Because in 40 minutes, like writing like this, it looks like not an introduction, but what do you want, from my perspective? Because like Simon, there's a IELTS instructor, he said that it should be like 2 sentences. Because you have 40 minutes and introduction is not so important, so it's just better to paraphrase and give your own opinion about it.
I think if you want to target the higher scores, it's important to show complexity. 40 minutes, everyone doesn't write at the same speed, and you can train yourself to write faster. I have some students in 40 minutes who write 200 words. I have some students who write 400 words. So I don't think that there's any metric that in 40 minutes, students only write a certain amount. You can train yourself to write faster. And I know about Simon, but I would argue that, so basically you want to take out the yellow part, and you just want to use the green part and the blue part, right? That's fair enough, but what I'm saying is if you want to get into that natural idiomatic language that's very effortless, you need to try to not write like a robot. So putting in your opinion, putting in a little bit of color into your writing is what's going to help elevate it. Okay? Okay. Sorry? It's not necessary to add facts. For example, I added the space race just because I knew about it. But if you didn't know about it, you can just say something like, space exploration is very interesting to people, full stop. And then you start with, however, many people think that, and then you start off. So it doesn't have to be a long hook. It can just be something like, space exploration continues to interest people. And then move on. right? So I don't think you don't have to take what I've written as like the sample essay and like I have to write it exactly like this. This is just an example of a way that you can write it. Mhm. If your ideas are weak, as in if they're wrong, as long as you're able to support it, substantiate it, then I think it's fine.
Ideas on the shelf, not deep,
No, okay, so if your ideas are not strong, but you support them, it's okay. But if your ideas are strong, but you don't support them, then it's not okay. Because this entire essay is about explaining why you support these two sides. Okay, so of course it's about the content of your answer, but it's more about how do you evidence it, how do you support it, how do you transition from one sentence to the other sentence. Okay, let's move on to the second one. Now, I'm following exactly the same pattern, but I'm talking about the other side, that some people say that it's essential for mankind. So I said, on the other hand, humans inherently are curious, inquisitive, and motivated creatures that have an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and discovery, which in some ways is satiated by the thrill of exploring the universe. So what is my point?
Like giving reasons why they're going to space, because they're curious.
Exactly. So my point is that curiosity is important for mankind. Moreover, previous missions have allowed us not only to advance our technological communication, but also helped use satellites to observe weather patterns, which have been essential for predicting natural disasters. So now my example is?
Like supporting the space exploration.
Yeah, which examples am I using?
Like satellites, technical communication,
Yeah.
they can help us.
Exactly. Then I said, in addition, with the recent fatalistic prediction that in a few decades Earth may be inhabitable, many researchers have looked for possibilities on other planets, which I think all of you mentioned that we should go into Mars or something. Therefore, and this is my link now, it could be said that if Earth does have a dystopian destiny that is being hypothesized for it, modern space exploration could save the future generations to come. So if you look at the pattern, again, I'm following point, example, explanation, link. I'm starting off with my transition words, and then I'm using some advanced lexical resource while also making compound sentences or complex sentences. So if we look at the lexical resource, what does inherently mean?
Like
Yeah,
it
exactly.
goes from ancestor to ancestor. Kind of.
No, that's inherent. This is inherent. Inherent, basically, like you explained, it means that it comes from inside us. We are naturally curious, motivated. Then I said unquenchable. Unquenchable
It means
thirst.
like extremely thirst.
It means that we never stop being thirsty for knowledge. Okay, and what does satiated mean? No? These are hard words, so I'm not expecting you to know them. Satiated basically means to be full, to be satisfied. So what I'm saying is that we always want to know more, and we always want to know more, and it never stops. But if we go into space, maybe we can stop wanting to know more. Then I said dystopian destiny.
It means like bad destiny.
Yeah, exactly. So people think that in the next 100 years, maybe our Earth won't exist because of overpopulation and because of resource depletion. So maybe if this does happen, and what does hypothesized mean?
Like expected.
Expected, yeah. Then maybe we would have to go into space exploration to save future generations. So if you had to explain what does this paragraph talk about, what am I saying? Yeah, and the importance is, I mentioned a lot of things. I said firstly it's important for weather patterns, for communication, but also it's important for our curiosity, and also it's important that we need to look outside of Earth if we want to save generations, because the way that we're going, maybe we won't have this planet for much longer. So now I've done one side and second side. Now I'm going to talk about my opinion. Now, in my opinion, I don't have this point example explanation link. I just have like a general paragraph about how I feel about it. So I said, in my opinion, I see merit on both sides. So I think somebody asked this, like, can you argue both sides? And I do. But I give my opinion for one specific point. I said, but I am more inclined to side with those who believe space exploration is wasteful, particularly if it is commercial. Government-funded exploration has been and continues to be useful in our day-to-day life, in our understanding of chemistry and physics. However, commercial spaceflight and races between countries are nothing but an ego-driven conquest to be masters of the universe. As a result, I strongly believe that government budgets should prioritize helping their citizens and helping our environment first, and the leftover funding should be used on other whims and fancies, such as pouring money into spaceflight development. So what am I arguing in my opinion? Yeah, that's my opinion. Did I give another opinion as well?
Like you should help others, helping their citizens, helping our environment first. So you're like, you're talking about Earth. I mean, not this money should only be spent on space, but also like on Earth, on public affairs.
But did I say that spaceflight is important? Yeah, I did, right in the beginning. I said I see merit on both sides. What does merit mean?
Like advantage.
Yeah, I see positives on both sides. And I am saying that especially government-funded space exploration, which is used to advance technology, advance our entire civilization, is important. But I have a problem with commercial space exploration, which is just a few people going in for fun. And then I said, because I think that it's more important to prioritize using this money to help other people. So, when you're giving your opinion, it's not necessary to just choose one opinion. I gave two opinions, but it's clear which one I'm siding for more. Which one am I siding for more?
Like as I said, like a stronger belief. I think this is your opinion. I mean, this money should be spent on government budgets. I mean, on Earth.
Yeah, exactly. So even though I'm saying that there are positives on both sides, I personally believe that it's a waste of money and it should be spent on Earth. Okay? Then we have our conclusion, which is I put it in the same format as the introduction. So I have, instead of a topic sentence or a hook sentence, I have a general sentence to conclude it. Then I have my paraphrase summarizing everything that I said in my body paragraph. And then I finish off with my opinion. So I said to conclude, people are often starry-eyed about space because it seems so unattainable. That's my topic sentence. Without question, the space missions of the past have enlightened us astronomically, but a line must be drawn to curb man's incessant need to jump on the next thing while ignoring current problems at hand. Lastly, I believe other causes are more deserving of government funding, albeit I do think space exploration has its own rewards. So once again, I'm stating that I see merit on both sides, but I think that there are more important things that the money should be spent on rather than space exploration. Okay, and you can see again, I'm using some lexical resource, like for example, I said starry-eyed, unattainable, astronomically. I have my to conclude and lastly, which is my CC, and I'm varying my sentences to hit my CC score and also my GRA score. So does it make sense? So this is the end of my essay. Does it make sense to you now, at each section of my writings, writing task 1 and writing task 2, I'm always writing in direct connection to the band descriptors. That's the most important thing you need to do if you want to target a high score. You need to look, if I want to get a 7, what does 7 require from me? And how can I reach that 7? If I want to get 8, so on and so forth. So, are there any questions about writing task 2?
I think there were some punctuation mistakes after however. I mean, in body 2. I mean,
So where's the question?
I mean, just, can you go body 2? Yeah, like however. No, body 2. And the next one. Body 3, sorry. Yeah. Physics, however, I think there should be a comma after however, I mean.
I don't think it really matters. I don't think it really matters.
Okay.
Okay, you had a question?
If it is your essay, it's probably 8.5 or 9-ish.
It can't be a 9 because I didn't get a 9.
You get that?
No, I didn't get 9 in writing. I got 8.5 in writing.
Okay. You gave really, really precise, actual, and really good, strong points. I mean, we are not 9 level. Like, we can write like 6.5 and 7-ish length for essay. So you are giving so good, precise data, and how we can like stabilize them. Like in first your party, like advantages and disadvantages. You give like both so strong argues. Let's say you argue like perfectly. How we can do that?
So I think what you mean is like, how can you get the knowledge to argue both sides? Is that what I'm saying? Okay, so this is something that I've said. The one thing that I would recommend, which doesn't help with your Ielts, but it helps with your general knowledge, is reading. So I'm a journalism student, and because of my course, I have to read the news every day, and I have to read the news from sports, what's happening in sports, what's happening in science, what's happening in politics. So every day I know a little bit about what's going on in the world. This is something I recommend. If your schools don't cover it or your friends don't talk about it, it's something that you need to do yourself to educate yourself about lots of topics. Now, if you want to know which topics you have to focus on, there are like 20 topics which are the most common topics in IELTS, like for example, environment, family, tourism, advertising. No, not to look at samples, to look at the topics and to educate yourself about the topics. So try to learn about what is space exploration. Learn, watch a TED Talk, read some articles, read some news about it. That's the only way that you're going to build your base knowledge that you can write about and that you can draw on in your essays and in your speaking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what idea generation is.
Like when I'm writing advantages, disadvantages, say I wrote the advantages, and after writing advantages, when I'm looking at my disadvantages is smart. Advantage is so strong and disadvantage so weak. How I can like give people like arguments.
So I wouldn't say that your advantage and disadvantage has to be of equal strength. In some situations, the advantages really overpower the disadvantages. But what I would recommend is not writing 500 advantages and then writing one disadvantage. Just choose the strongest. So just choose, like as you can see in my essay, there are, as you said, so many advantages of space exploration, but I only used one. And there are so many disadvantages of space exploration, but I only used one. In that case, try to balance it by making your arguments equivalent. So even if one is stronger than the other, try to make them like with like. So one for advantage, one for disadvantage. Any other questions? I don't know how many this was. I think it was about 400. I think so.
There are like lots of IELTS instructors, and all of them write differently. And this kind of question can be like that students have a dilemma, which one to choose, which IELTS instructor to follow. So which one would you like to suggest? I mean, because yours and Simon's and Chris Pell's and Lee's, all of them different, and students having a problem, which one to choose? I mean, yeah.
I think actually the benefit of looking at a lot of instructors is deciding for yourself which one makes more sense to you. So, for example, I had a student before who said that he wants to say the advantage, then the opinion, then the disadvantage, then the opinion. And if that makes sense to you, then go ahead. Personally, that doesn't make sense to me, so that's not how I write. So if you have exposure to 4 or 5 different instructors, then you decide for yourself which one do you think is easiest to understand. Because at the end of the day, we all have our qualifications, right? I don't know what qualifications Liz and Simon have, but I have a TESOL, CELTA, and I have an IELTS. And I have the proof that whatever I understand it has some basis, right? So if I have the qualifications and Simon has the qualifications, you don't need to wonder which one is better. They're both correct. You just choose whichever one you like the most. Sorry? Whose writings?
Tahasani.
Who?
Ibrahim Tahasani.
The book. Taha. Yeah, so I have seen his book as well. And I think that sometimes when students want to get some ideas, he's good just because he's already written all the essays for you. But I never suggest reading essays to try to remember them, you know, because the way we train you for IELTS is that if you have a question that you didn't prepare for, still you need to have the skills to be able to answer it, right? You can't just memorize 100 essays and then hope you get one of those essays in the actual exam. That's not going to help you, right? Any more questions?
Like you said, like in body one, for example, there can be a link like conclusion and refer to the next paragraph.
Yeah.
So can you like show the next paragraph, link to the next paragraph? How did you link?
So I use them as concluding sentences. So this is the first one. So I said, therefore, space exploration for the sake could be. So this is my concluding sentence. If I wanted to make it into moving into the second paragraph, I could say, yet, even though there are many disadvantages of space exploration, some would argue that there are other benefits. And then I would move into this, and then I would start by saying overall, or on the other hand, and then start like that.
Okay.
Sure.
My question is related to the listening.
Mm-hmm.
What if a person who's getting constantly 35, 34, I mean, around 8, 8.5, how they can make their event score to the 9? Like, they're solving all the time at 8, 8.5, but 4 or 3 mistakes, which are really stupid and silly mistakes, but they are constant. How we can clean up?
I think it depends on the nature of the mistakes that you're making. So if the mistakes you're making are related to spelling, for example, you're spelling the words wrong, then that would be what you have to focus on. The most common mistake students make is that they don't have enough time to read the questions, and that's why they run out of time to see what is being asked of them. The one thing that I recommend to my students is you'll notice that in the speakings, they have the recording, and then you finish the last question, and they still keep talking for maybe 7, 8 seconds. In that time, don't just wait for that time to finish. I would already recommend moving on to the next part and getting 5, 6 seconds extra to read the questions that is being asked of you. The other thing that helps in listening is trying to use prediction and trying to imagine what do you think the answer is going to be, especially where there are blank spaces rather than multiple choice. If you read the question, try to guess, are they going to be asking me for a name or a number or an adjective or a time? That's also going to be helping you, because then when you hear it, you already have the idea in your head, so you're much more likely to think that that's the right one. So that's what I recommend for listening. But I think the only thing that really helps with listening is practicing every single day and doing as much practice as you can. And if you have problems with multiple choice, then obviously you should practice that. Are there any more questions about writing? Otherwise, we'll move on to general IELTS questions. Writing question? Okay.
What do you think about this one? For example, there's a person, advantage of essay. Some teachers say that if you write a lot of positive sentences, it will be better. But you said, write them equally.
Yeah. So if we look back at the band descriptors over here, it says, if you want to get a 7, addresses all parts of the task. So it doesn't matter about writing more for the positives. You have to evaluate each section of the task equally. So, of course, you have to say as much about the advantages as you say about the disadvantages. Yeah.
I think can we write in the writing test syllable? In the writing test, can we write the syllable?
For what?
Yeah, in the writing test, can we write syllable?
Which writing task?
And task 2 or task 1?
Yeah.
And can we write for which we should start for writing test? In the first of all, writing test 1 or writing test 2?
Oh, which one should you start with? So, to me, it doesn't make a difference, but I know that a lot of students strategically start with writing task 2 because they want to finish it because it's worth more than writing task 1.
So I think typically most people and most teacher advise to start the writing test 2 because the writing test is very important for according to get high scores for writing test.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. But like I said, I train my students to make sure that they finish both essays in 1 hour.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions? Yeah. So if you only write in your conclusion, you will only write 1 or 2 sentences. And that does not mean that you're answering the question completely. That means you're going to be stuck here at a 6 because addresses all parts of the task, although some parts may be more fully covered than others. So if you're writing your first body paragraph, let's say it's 6 sentences, and your second body paragraph is 6 sentences, and your opinion is 2 sentences, do you think that it was equal to the other 2? It's not, right? So in that case, that's why I recommend that you also put a third body paragraph just to make sure that you're addressing the task, and then you can just restate it shortly in your conclusion. Okay? Any more questions? Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, that's for the IELTS examiners, and I don't think that that's available to us.
What do you think? Are there any differences? I mean, are there any more information for task response and others?
I mean, I've never seen what the examiners see. I've only gone on this, and when I was practicing for the IELTS, this is what I looked at.
So you got like 8.5. What do you think? Which criteria you were lacking? Task response or lexical resource? I mean, because there can be like 0.5 mistake. I mean,
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah. I don't know. When I did my IELTS exam, I only prepared for 8 days because I didn't have time to prepare. So if I maybe did the exam after I had all this knowledge of, how to target them, and I had read all these different essays, maybe it would have been different, but maybe my lexical resource, maybe.
Is it okay to use idioms in writing?
Yeah, it is, but I would just say that when people speak in English, we don't use idioms,
Yes.
really, when we talk. So I think what they are talking about more is like idiomatic language and using collocations rather than using full-on idioms, because we don't use idioms when we talk in English. Yeah, you shouldn't use informal. You should try to write it formally.
And I think we should use metaphorical expressions.
Like what?
Like on our doorstep, or to lie down on the cushion or something. I saw such kind of metaphorical expressions in Simon's.
I mean, I think that if you know it, then maybe you can use it, but more often than not, students don't use it in the right context. And then it, like, rather than giving you extra points, it takes away from your points. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it. You had a question?
I heard from YouTube, and they're claiming that we cannot use phrasal words and abbreviations in our writing testimony.
Like which abbreviations?
Like VIP maybe.
I mean, just for me to be on the safe side, I would write it out. Like I would say very important person, and then in brackets I would say VIP. Or for example, I would say United Nations, and then in brackets I would say UN. That's how I would do it, because when we do academic essays, we always have to write it first, and then in brackets, and then after that we can use the abbreviation.
What about phrasal?
I don't see why phrasal verbs would be a problem. I don't see how it would be a problem. Are there any questions about generally IELTS? Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do is I learn topic-based, like I teach topic-based vocabulary. So for example, the 30 most common words that you can use when you talk about animals or you talk about environment. And then do spelling tests for yourself. So the way that I teach spelling is you learn the spelling, and then you learn the meaning, and then you learn how to use it in a sentence. That's how you move your vocabulary from passive to active, and you get used to using the right spelling. So, like I said, you really have to analyze where you're making mistakes. Are you making mistakes in spelling or in multiple choice questions? Yeah, so in multiple choice, usually the problem is that students are not listening clearly to what the question is asking you, because usually 2 options will be very similar to each other, and there will be a very small difference between the 2 points. So you need to make sure in your listening and your reading, you're not analyzing. You're not thinking, okay, they said this, so it must mean this. They're not implying anything. Exactly what they said is what the answer will be. That's usually the biggest mistake.
As you said, you got your IELTS preparation. You prepared for the IELTS 8 days, right? Which is really short period of time.
Yeah.
And you got none.
Yeah.
what do you think? It depends on people who are naturally talented or who have got like maybe special abilities to take the IELTS, or it depends on just quantity of time, it's a matter of time. What do you think?
I think you give me a lot of credit. If you did the IELTS in Uzbek or in Russian, everyone would get a 9 as well. You know? So it's just the fact that I did my IELTS in the language that I was the most confident in. And maybe it requires a little bit of skill just understanding the band descriptors. I was writing, targeting what I know I was going to be checked on. Right? So I was not just writing a good essay. I was writing an essay based on what I was going to be tested on. So that's the kind of critical analysis. This is why I taught this, so that now when you go into writing, you're not just thinking about putting all your information onto the paper. You're thinking, am I addressing the 4 things that I'm being tested on? So I think that's the only thing, on top of it being pretty much like my first language. I also wanted to say that in August, Cambridge is launching my online course. So it's going to be a speaking and writing course that you're going to be doing online, and then you'll have live sessions on the weekend with me. And at the same time, you'll have your support teachers in the branch who will be testing your writing and your speaking as well. Okay, so that's just something to look out for if you're interested. It will launch in August. Okay, any more questions? Yes. Your reading? So what I do with my reading is I always look at the questions first, and then based on that I go back and read my text. So if you're a fast reader, some people can read the entire 3 texts. That's quite difficult for people because it's a lot of information in 1 hour. So what I always do is I look at the questions first, and then I try to find keywords in the text. That's because in your reading you can almost guarantee that either the same word will be used or a synonym will be used. So if the question asks something, then a synonym will be used in the real text. So if you just scan through it and try to look for locations or names or dates, usually you'll find like 2 sentences and the answer will be somewhere in there. And then it's just a matter of comparing the question and the real text, and then usually you'll find the answer from that. And in order to improve your speed in reading, you just have to do it like over and over again. That's the only way that you improve your reading and also your vocabulary. So for that, the materials, obviously you have all the Cambridge books. There's like general and academic. Also, you have Barron's, you have official IELTS. And if you just want to increase your speed and also your general knowledge, I would recommend reading newspapers and magazines. For example, New York Times, Financial Times, Economic Times, listening to TED Talks. All of these will indirectly help your productive and receptive skills in English. Any more questions?
I heard that like reading passage 3, the third passage, it's more likely like band 9 from writing, but like passage 1 is like 7 or 7.5, and passage 2 is like 8. Mm-hmm. Is it true? I mean,
so I know that it gets progressively more difficult,
yeah,
and you should spend more time on the third one as you do as the first one. But usually what it is that the third one is usually something which is like scientific or academic, and that's why it's more difficult. But I have not seen any comparison to writing.
I mean the structures and because like reading passage 3 can also help in writing because we can find like new vocabulary. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think that if you want to improve your vocabulary, definitely when you're doing your readings, underline words that you don't know, and usually will help. But I have to say that usually reading is on such obscure topics. Like for example, my 3rd or 2nd reading was about bees. So I don't know how much the bee vocabulary would help me in my writing. You know what I mean? But yeah, sometimes you definitely pick up words. Like for example, in the vocabulary that I showed you, sometimes I used topic-based vocabulary to science, but I also just used complex vocabulary in general. And you'll see that my writing task 2 vocabulary was a lot more complex than my writing task 1 vocabulary. So yeah, even if you were just to analyze my essay, you would pick up maybe 5, 6 new words that you could use in your essays. Sure, yeah, like I've seen students do that sometimes where they just write keywords, but sometimes it depends. Like usually in part 4, it's happening so fast that maybe you don't have time to write notes and also write the answers and listen at the same time. That could be quite difficult, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a skill that you have to develop like everything else. So if you expose yourself to more listening, then it will benefit you. So doing other things like, for example, listening to interviews or podcasts or TED Talks in your free time, it could help you become better at your listening in the IELTS exam. Yeah, films also help, but the only thing is, films, if you're reading with subtitles, you're not focusing on your receptive. You're not listening. You're not focusing on your your listening skill. You're like listening, but you're reading, so it's not the same. You would have to do it without looking at their mouths and stuff. Yes. How many what? When I was practicing for IELTS, I was doing probably 2 or 3 in a day, but only because I had only just 1 week to do it. So it depends on how much time you have. So maybe you should start by doing 1 or 2 tasks, like 1 or 2 tests, full tests, and then see based on that if you need more practice or less practice.
Is it okay, like, about discussion essay? First, we will discuss body 1 will be about our opposing view, and the body 2 will be about our supporting view, and at the same time we give our own opinion, because Simon does like this. I mean.
Yeah. So, if that's a strategy and a structure that works for you, then that's fair enough. But you just need to make sure: are you saying your opinion as much as you're saying the other body paragraphs? Because again, you have to think: am I reaching the band descriptors? So if I'm saying 5 sentences for opinion, for opposing, 5 for, and then 2 for opinion, you yourself know that you're not reaching the band descriptor in that case. So the structure is not as important as the content. Anything else? Yes.
I'm sorry, this is far from the topic.
Mm-hmm.
The topic that we are talking about, but it's really interesting for me. You study British University, right?
Yeah.
In Britain.
Yeah.
And Australian University.
Yeah.
How did you, let's say, how you were able to enter that university? I mean, does that matter having IELTS, SAT, and TESOL for these universities or not?
So when I went into my undergraduate, I did not need to take IELTS because I had done higher level English in my school. So I was able to bypass that requirement. When I entered into my Australian university, I didn't need SAT or anything, that's for America. But I didn't need IELTS for my university, I needed it for my visa. Because Australia has different rules for their universities and for just entering their country. So because I have an Indian passport, so unless you have an American passport or an Irish passport, basically a passport where they speak English as their first language, you have to do the IELTS exam. And I needed a 5.5 to pass to get my visa. Okay. Yeah, I used to work at Oibek and now I'm at Nobza. Question?
First of all, thank you for your knowledge, for your share.
No worries.
My question might be a little bit personal to you. Why did you choose Uzbekistan and Cambridge Learning Center?
So I didn't choose Uzbekistan. My family works here. My dad works here. So I just came, and because of COVID, I had to stay here. And I chose Cambridge because I Googled like which one's at the top, and Cambridge came. So I came and I applied. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. I think Cambridge will put this on YouTube, so you're able to see it afterwards. And thank you for your patience. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for your time.